Yeah, go ahead. And so I tell them a conversion story. I tell it in 30 seconds. I talk about what I was like before I became a Christian, how I became a Christian, and what difference it's made in my life. Sometimes I'll talk about hardship in my life and how God sustained me. Okay? After I do that 30 seconds, no more than a minute, I'll say, now, do you have a story like that? They might say, yeah, I got a story like that. And they start like this. Yes, I grew up in the church. I was baptized. My father's a Baptist preacher, by the way. And that's supposed to give you the impression they know the Lord. You know when you hear somebody's got a real testimony, right? Yeah, I was lost, but now I'm found and God's changed my life. That's a Christian testimony. But when you hear somebody that doesn't have a Christian testimony, that's when you can say, you don't have to say, wrong. I knew you were lost. You don't have to do that. But you know they don't know the Lord. And that's when you can say, hey, would you be interested in learning more? Would you be interested in reading the Bible with me for 3 or 4 weeks? And you just say 3 or 4 weeks, because if you say, let's read the Bible for the next 5 years, I'm not going to make that kind of commitment. If you say 3 or 4 weeks, then after a couple of weeks, if they're still interested, you just say, would you like to continue? Most of them will. So what do? Let's say you're out on the street and you meet somebody like that on a prayer walk. You say, they say, yeah, I'd like to do this. I said, okay, let's start tomorrow night. How about that? I'll come to your house. And by the way, let your wife or your husband or your children, let them come too. If you got some neighbors, let them come. You see, here's our problem in the church. We think we can grow by addition. Addition will never work. It's got to be multiplication. Okay? The analogy I like to use is this. In a familial sense. My wife and I got married nearly 50 years ago. God has given us 3 living children. They're married, and now we have 12 grandchildren. If those 12 grandchildren get married, and we're still alive, then the family will go from 20 to about, another 32. And then when they start having kids, we're up to 70 or 80 people in 2 to 3 generations. You get it? The context of the church. You lead someone to Christ by His grace. You work with that one person. If everybody in the church, let's say you got a church of 6 people, 8 people. Everybody, you say, God, give us one person each. One person we can work with. Maybe they're Christian, maybe they're not, but we want to work with them. And you disciple that person. You spend a year with that person. After you got 60, say you got 8 people. After you got 16 people. And they're all doing the same. Now you got 32. Now you got 64. Now you got 120. Now it's time to start another church. You see? That's the way. And I mentioned this, I think, Sunday afternoon. There's 2 ways to start a church. One's addition, one's multiplication. I tell my friends in Africa all the time, we do not want to be an elephant church planting movement. We want to be a rabbit church planting movement. They say, what does that mean? I said, well, now, an elephant, a female elephant, cannot bear children until she's 15. And usually, not until they're 21. The gestation period is 21 months. And so after 2 years, you go from 2 to 3 elephants. Now rabbits, on the other hand, you have rabbits in the Philippines? Okay. My understanding is rabbits can bear young when they're only 8 weeks old. And the gestation period is 8 weeks. And when they have little ones, they usually have 8. So in 2 years, you've got a couple of million rabbits. You see? And so we want to be a church